Before history, before time as we know it, there was a promise, an order, a cosmic law to guard, to watch, to protect the young and fragile humanity in its planetary cradle, guiding its development from a sacred distance. From the high spheres of existence, from a dimension of pure light and frequency, a legion of glorious beings, known in the ancient texts as the Watchers, was sent to shepherd creation. They were the guardians, the gardeners of a new consciousness, tasked to nurture, not to interfere. But observation became longing, protection became covetousness. From their ethereal positions, they looked down through the veil that separates worlds and saw the daughters of men. They saw the ephemeral, passionate beauty of flesh and dust, the dance of mortality, and they desired it with an intensity that shook the pillars of their own immortal nature. The Book of Enoch, a text so ancient and controversial it was removed from most canonical Bibles, acts as our leaked document. It records the exact moment of betrayal. On the top of this mountain, 200 of their leaders, under the command of an angel named Semyaza, sealed a forbidden pact. The text recounts the oath they swore, cursing one another should they retreat from their intent. The decision was made. They would descend. They would take human wives. They would cross the sacred boundary between heaven and earth, mixing the essence of the divine with the passion of the mortal. They did not know, or perhaps in their arrogance, they knew all too well that they were not just breaking a law. They were rewriting biology. They were planting an unholy seed in the garden of creation. They were about to give birth to monsters.
This is knowledge that was sealed away for millennia, locked in texts considered apocryphal, too dangerous to be known. Before we break that seal and reveal the cataclysmic consequences of that pact, I ask you to join ours. Comment, "I want to know," to show that you are ready to hear the story that was deliberately erased. Your curiosity is the key that opens this forbidden archive. The consequence of the pact was immediate and monstrous. From this unholy union, this forbidden genetic alchemy, a new race was born. The Bible calls them the Nephilim, which translates to the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. The Book of Enoch describes them in terrifying detail. Giants, 300 cubits tall, a stature that made men and trees look like grasshoppers. But this profane union produced an unstable offspring, an error in creation. They possessed the strength of their celestial fathers, but without their wisdom or divine purpose. They were giants in body, but void in spirit, driven only by a primordial appetite and an inherited arrogance. Their existence was an anomaly, and like all anomalies, it trended toward chaos. This story is not unique. In Greek mythology, the Titans were the children of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth, a race of divine giants whose rebellion nearly destroyed the cosmos. The parallel is undeniable. The hunger of the Nephilim was a bottomless abyss. Enoch describes how they consumed all the labor, all the food, all the animals of mankind. The earth, once bountiful, became a banquet for their profane appetites. And when there was nothing left, they turned against men themselves, hunting them like animals and devouring them. The text is explicit and brutal. It speaks of a world where the cry of humanity rose to the heavens, a desperate plea against the tyranny of their new masters. And then, In a frenzy of hunger and power, they turned on each other, drinking the blood and eating the flesh of their own kind. Cannibalism was their law. The world drowned in blood. The first line of demigods brought not enlightenment, but a nightmare of violence and consumption. But the corruption was not just physical. The true plague was the knowledge that the Watchers, in their forbidden love, poured out upon the world. They opened the floodgates of a wisdom for which humanity was not ready. Each leader of the Watchers taught a specific profane art. Azazel, the most infamous, taught metallurgy, not to plow the earth, but to forge swords, knives, shields, and armor. He introduced organized warfare to the world. He also taught women the art of cosmetics and ornaments, sowing vanity and seduction. Samyaza, the leader of the Pact, taught enchantments and sorcery. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments. Barakiel taught astrology, the art of predicting fate, robbing men of their free will. Kokabiel taught the mysteries of the heavenly signs. Vanity, greed, the lust for power, and the art of killing flourished. The world, once a garden, became a slaughterhouse and a brothel, corrupted by the profane wisdom of the heavens. A myth, a legend, an allegory about corruption. That's what the official history tells us. But what if there was physical proof? Evidence that was systematically found and then systematically disappeared. Our investigation leads us to an archive of forgotten news, a memory the internet has helped unearth. The late 19th, early 20th century, a flood of reports in newspapers across America. The New York Times, The Sun, papers from coast to coast. Farmers in Ohio plowing their fields, miners in California blasting rock, amateur archaeologists across the country all reporting the same impossible discovery: skeletons of gigantic proportions. Consider the case of Wisconsin, 1912. Near Lake Delavan, a team of archaeologists discovered 18 skeletons of an unknown race, described as having elongated skulls, cruder features than the local natives, and an immense stature. It was reported across the country. The fate of the bones? Sent for study, and never seen again. In 1891, in Arizona, workers digging a building's foundation discovered a stone sarcophagus 4 meters deep. Inside, the mummy of a man who measured, according to reports, 12 feet tall, almost 3.7 meters. The list goes on. 7, 8, 9, up to 12 feet tall. Skulls with double rows of teeth. Femurs twice as long as normal. The evidence is not limited to America. In Egypt in 1988, a 38-centimeter mummified finger was photographed, complete with bone and nail back. Analysis suggested its owner would have been over 5 meters tall. The finger has since vanished. In Ireland, a 12-foot giant was reportedly discovered during a mining operation in 1895. The pattern is always the same. The discovery, the initial astonishment, the local newspaper report, and then silence. Many of these reports end with the same sentence: the bones were sent to the Smithsonian Institution for study. But the Smithsonian today denies the existence of most of these finds. Accusations persist that the institution acted as a kind of history cleaner. Why? Because a 3-meter-tall skeleton doesn't just challenge human evolution as a slow, gradual process, it shatters it. It suggests a parallel lineage, an interference, a far more complex and explosive history. A world with giants is a world where the Book of Genesis and the Book of Enoch suddenly seem less like myth and more like a field report. For 19th century science, determined to free itself from theology, this was an anomaly that could not be permitted. The archive is full of ghosts, of bones crying out for recognition from dusty boxes in some secret warehouse. If the Smithsonian cleaned the American files, the global memory is harder to erase. The story of giants is not exclusive to Judeo-Christian texts. It is a planetary signature. In Norse mythology, the Jotun were a race of ice and fire giants, primordial enemies of the gods of Asgard. In Ireland, the Fomorians were a race of semi-divine giants. In the legend of the Paiute Indians of North America, they speak of an ancient war against a race of red-haired, cannibalistic giants called the Site-Ka. In 1911, bat guano was extracted from a cave in Nevada, and the miners discovered what appeared to be the remains of these giants, including a human jawbone visibly larger than normal. The Bible, even after the removal of Enoch, still speaks of them. King Og of Bashan, one of the last remnants of the giants, whose iron bed was over 4 meters long. And of course, Goliath, the Philistine champion who challenged the army of Israel. The story of David and Goliath is not told as a myth, but as a war record, an encounter between a man and a descendant of the forbidden lineage. The evidence seems to vanish as soon as it's found. History is actively cleaned, edited. Here at the Codex, our mission is to be the evidence room that cannot be erased. If you believe this story needs to be told, leave a like to strengthen it and subscribe to ensure it is never silenced again. If the bones were hidden, what about the constructions? Official archaeology tells us the Great Pyramids were built around 2500 BC by the Egyptians using ramps and slave labor. But this theory is a house of cards. There are no plans, no records, not a single bronze tool found that can cut the millions of granite blocks with laser-like precision. And Giza is not alone. Fly to Baalbek in Lebanon. At the base of its Roman temple, we find the stone of the pregnant woman, a single cut block of stone weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. How did a supposedly ancient civilization move this? Fly to Sacsayhuaman in Peru, with its walls of 100-ton polygonal stones, fitted so perfectly that not even a knife blade can pass between them. The official story talks of ropes and ramps. Mathematics and physics say it's nearly impossible, unless we are ignoring a crucial variable in the equation, unless the builders were not human. What if the pyramids are not Egyptian? What if they are much, much older? Geologists like Robert Schoch have pointed to the deep rain erosion marks on the Sphinx and its enclosure, suggesting it was carved not in an age of desert, but in an age of torrential rains, thousands of years before the pharaohs. Official science has no civilization to place in that era, but our theory does. The era of rain erosion coincides perfectly with the era described in the ancient texts, the world before the flood, the world of the giants. Marine shell fossils are found all over the Giza Plateau. This land was once underwater, under a great flood. The same flood that is mentioned in hundreds of cultures around the world. The same flood that, according to the ancient texts, was sent to cleanse the earth of the Nephilim's corruption. This is the theory that connects everything. The pyramids and other megalithic structures around the world would not be tombs or temples, but works of a pre-Diluvian civilization, an architecture built by and for beings of a different scale. The strength of the giants makes the mystery of construction obsolete. They didn't need complex ramps, they had raw power. They built a world on a monumental scale, a world that challenged the heavens. And the Great Flood, The divine consequence of their transgression was what submerged it, leaving only these indestructible structures as silent witnesses to a forgotten age. But the end of an era is rarely a clean cut. The texts suggest the lineage was not entirely annihilated. The Bible itself, after the story of Noah, continues to mention the descendants of the giants. King Og of Bashan, the champion Goliath. They are described as the remnants, a degenerating lineage, perhaps with a smaller stature, but still formidable. And what if the history of humanity after the flood is in fact the story of the slow, painful eradication of the last survivors of this forbidden race? The great battles of mythology, the war of gods and heroes against monsters and titans. Could they be echoes of this final cleansing? The flood may have cleansed the world of the giants, but it could not completely erase their mark. What if the most enduring legacy of the Nephilim is not in stone, but in our own blood? Modern science calls the condition gigantism, a tumor on the pituitary gland that causes an overproduction of growth hormone. A disorder, an anomaly, a tragic disease. But the Book of Enoch and the ancient myths offer us a different, more epic perspective. What if it is not a disease? What if it is a memory? A genetic echo of the forbidden lineage, a recessive gene that, from time to time, through the long ages of humanity, awakens and manifests itself. Not as a power, but as a curse, an imperfect and painful remembrance of that time when there were giants on the earth, a whisper of our forbidden past, still present and pulsating in our DNA, a reminder that the boundary between the human and the divine was once violated. The story of the Nephilim is just one chapter in the library of knowledge that was lost, suppressed, or classified as myth. The Pact of the angels, the tyranny of the giants, the purifying cataclysm, and the echo that survives in our stones and in our genes. What other myth or legend do you believe is the record of a real event? Atlantis? The War of the Gods? Hyperborea? Share it in the comments and let's build the index of our lost codex together. Subscribe to become a guardian of this knowledge. The truth is out there, not to be invented, but to be rediscovered. Together, we will find it.